Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. As always, I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and we have it is strictly UFC show today, so that should be very exciting. We had no Bellator, we have no PFL for a little while, so we will be focusing mostly on the UFC for the next couple weeks. I know July 22nd, I believe it is, there will be a Bellator event. We'll obviously go over that as it's in my home state of Washington, so I will actually be attending that event. I'm very excited to do so. But let's focus on what we have for this week. A couple nights ago, we had UFC Fight Night. The Battle of the Rafaels. Rafael dos Anjos, former lightweight champion, took on up-and-coming prospect Rafael Fiziev. Very great fight, but it was also a very fun card overall. We're going to start off with the first fight, Ronnie Lawrence versus Said Yakub Kakramanov. This was basically a grappling domination on the side of Kakramanov. He landed 10 takedowns in this fight. So got to give a little bit of credit to Ronnie Lawrence for not ever really giving up, keeping it going, trying to get back up again and again. But at the end of the day, Kakramanov was just too good of a grappler. Basically, every time Ronnie Lawrence stood up and was able to get the escape, he would get taken back down in the matter of the next 30 seconds. So absolute domination on the side of Kakramanov. But a little bit of credit you got to give to Ronnie Lawrence for being able to get out of the situations that he was put in. Next up, Kennedy Zechukwu took on Carl Roberson. Kind of the same story with this fight. Zechukwu controlled this entire fight on the ground, landing 5 of the 7 takedowns he attempted, and was trying for quite a few submissions to go along with that. By the third round, Carl Roberson was just completely gassed. He had nothing left in the gas tank from the constant grappling that Zechukwu was putting on him. Zechukwu ended up getting full mount, just rained down humongous elbows all over Carl Roberson. Eventually, Herb Dean did have to step in, call the fight off, and Zechukwu was able to get the TKO victory due to ground and pound. Then next up, David Onama took on Garrett Armfield. This was a very entertaining fight that in the first round was actually fairly close, which is kind of surprising considering Garrett Armfield did take this fight on fairly short notice. I want to say it was around a week, maybe even under a week notice he took this fight. And David Onama has been very good since joining the UFC. I do think Onama did win the first round, but it was still fun to see them kind of trading big blows in that first round. The second round, though, Onama ended up taking full control of this fight, was able to get the fight to the ground, eventually got the head and arm choke, got the submission victory. So David Onama basically went in there and did what he was supposed to do, get the victory over the short notice Garrett Armfield. Then we have Antonia Shevchenko versus Courtney Casey. This was an insanely close fight and kind of a controversial fight. A lot of people thought Courtney Casey won this fight. I could have honestly seen it go either way. Shevchenko definitely got that second round. She was the more active fighter. She was landing big strikes. So she clearly got that one. Courtney Casey got the third round without a doubt. She got a couple takedowns, controlled on top for most of that third round, and got the third round. So it really all came down to that first round. I really could have seen it go either way. I know Shevchenko did get a bit of control time, but she didn't do a whole lot with it. So she's standing on top. She's laying on top of Courtney Casey, but Courtney Casey is being the more active fighter on the bottom. So that was a tough decision. ultimately, at the end of the day, two of the judges did give it to Shevchenko. She was able to get the split decision victory. But honestly, if they would have given it to Courtney Casey, I wouldn't have been upset at that either. And now for the premier prelim of the night, Cody Brundage versus Tresean Gore. Cody Brundage looked absolutely fantastic in this fight, especially in the striking department, which we knew going in was kind of a weakness for him. He's a great grappler. He's not a bad striker, but he's never shown flashes of being a very good striker. Where in this fight, he showed those flashes of really, really good striking. That was made very obvious when he yelled into the camera after his TKO victory, "I thought we were wrestling." So that goes to show everything that guy has done has been centered around grappling, wrestling, submissions. But for him to get the TKO victory over a guy like Tresean Gore, who made it so far in the Ultimate Fighter season 29, so not this one that's happening right now, of course, but the one before that. So it was great to see Cody Brundage show the big improvements in his striking game and get this win on a semi-big stage of the premier prelim. Now for the very exciting main card, starting off with the legend himself, Michael Johnson, taking on Jamie Mullarkey. Another insanely close fight that really, at the end of the day, could have gone either way in this one, too. It ended up being the fight of the night, rightfully so, too. This fight was absolutely awesome. Two guys with terrific chins. I mean, they were taking huge blows, just going back and forth on each other. I think this is kind of the same as the Shevchenko fight, where Michael Johnson clearly took the second round. I think that was clear as day. Jamie Mullarkey, I feel, took the third round clear as day, or maybe vice versa. I keep getting those two rounds mixed up. But at the end of the day, it came down to that first round. Two of the judges did give it to Mullarkey. I could have seen it go either way. I actually kind of leaned towards Michael Johnson a bit more, but I could see why they gave Jamie Mullarkey that first round, because I know it wasn't credited as one, but both guys got a knockdown in that first round. I know they only gave credit to Michael Johnson for getting the knockdown, but I fully feel that Jamie Mullarkey's first round strike was a knockdown also. So I think that was 1-1. I could see it going either way. But at the end of the day, it's what the judges think, and two of them thought that Jamie Mullarkey got the win. Next up was Ayman Zahabi versus Ricky Turcios. This was kind of a weird fight, I'm not going to lie. Turcios was far more active. He threw 130 more strikes, but he only landed 27 of the 235 strikes he threw. What? I've never seen numbers like that. Ayman Zahabi threw less than half of the strikes that Turcios did and landed double what Turcios did. I mean, it was just a really weird fight. Zahabi clearly got the win. I mean, when you double strikes landed when throwing less than half of them, I feel like every single time you should get the win. And that's what the judges gave Ayman Zahabi. Great defense or poor offense by Turcios, I don't really know. But it was a fairly dominant victory for Ayman Zahabi. And that brings us to Jared Vanderaa versus Chase Sherman in the heavyweight division. This fight was actually a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. I was dreading watching this fight, considering both guys were on such big losing streaks. I didn't really feel like this fight deserved to be on the main card. But it was actually very, very entertaining. I thought that after the first round, both guys would be gassed because they were pretty active in that first round. But both kept on trucking. It was a very, very fun strikers duel in this fight. Eventually, in the third round, Sherman was able to land a flurry of strikes, just huge blows. and get the TKO victory. So congratulations to him for snapping his losing streak. And that leads us to Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Said Nurmagomedov. I wouldn't say this fight was close necessarily, but it was very entertaining to watch. Douglas Silva de Andrade did end up losing and fairly clearly lost that fight, but he still had a lot of bright moments in this fight. He was landing bombs too, and he showed that his chin is nothing to mess with, because Said was landing humongous strikes, and he kind of just took them and went with it. So big props to both of these guys, especially though Said Nurmagomedov, he got the victory, and a fairly clear victory over a veteran of this game like Douglas Silva de Andrade. I mean, the guy has 33 fights, and that was his 5th loss in those 33 fights. So he's obviously a very good fighter, and to get that win for Said is very, very big. That leads us to the co-main event, Caio Borralho versus Armen Petrosyan. This wasn't the most entertaining fight, I will say, but it was honestly just a grappling masterclass on the side of Borralho. He controlled a big majority of this fight on the ground. Petrosyan, when the fight was on the feet, which wasn't very often, Petrosyan did have some bright moments. He was landing some big strikes, but at the end of the day, he was completely outmatched on the ground. Borralho kind of dominated this fight for a majority of it with the grappling and got the decision victory. And that leads to our main event of the evening, Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. This was a huge win for Rafael Fiziev, the biggest of his MMA career. I like the fact that even though he was most likely up at least 3-1 in the judges' eyes, to still go out in that 5th round, be ultra aggressive, get the finish in the 5th round. You don't see a whole lot of 5th round finishes. So huge props to him. Getting a KO victory over RDA is no easy task. RDA has a tremendous chin. He does not get knocked out. But I will say RDA did hold his own in this fight, even though Fiziev was so good against the takedown. Fiziev defended 14 of the 16 takedowns that RDA threw his way. We all know the grappler that RDA is, so very impressive by Fiziev, but also RDA did show a lot of bright moments with his striking. I do think he took that 4th round too, so to go down 3 rounds to nothing and then come back and take that 4th round shows the heart that he has. But at the end of the day, Rafael Fiziev proved through and through that he is a true contender or future contender in this lightweight division. But I do struggle to see what the UFC is going to do with him next. There's not a lot of guys that I see above him that would be willing to take that fight. I heard a lot of things against Justin Gaethje. I think that would be an awesome fight. No doubt about it. It would be a great fight to watch. Very fun. But I'm not sure Justin Gaethje takes that fight. So it's going to be a weird dynamic of who will actually take a fight against Rafael Fiziev. It'll be very interesting to see. But huge win nonetheless for Rafael Fiziev. But now let's get into some fight predictions. We have a huge fight night card coming up this Saturday morning for us on the west coast of the U.S. We have a pretty early start. I'm not going to complain too much because I know all the European fans and all the Asian fans, they got to get up super early for most of these cards. But we do have an 8 a.m. for the prelims over here on the west coast of the U.S. But nonetheless, I will be awake for it, and I'm very excited as we start off with Jessica Penne versus Emily Ducote. The UFC veteran Jessica Penne taking on the Invicta strawweight champion Emily Ducote, who will actually be making her UFC debut also. Jessica Penne did take a long layoff. She didn't have a fight from 2017 to 2021. which might have worked to her benefit because before that, she was on a 3-fight losing streak. After that, she has won 2 straight. So it looks like, at least so far, that it has worked in her favor. Penne is a great grappler and will without a doubt try to get this fight on the ground in her world. Dakota seems a little bit more well-rounded. She can strike, she can take you down, use jiu-jitsu. I expect her to try to stay on the feet a little bit more, as Jessica Penne is such a great grappler, but I don't think it will be much success for her. I have Penny winning this fight. Duco did take this fight on a bit short notice, not like a week or anything, but she didn't get the full training camp for this fight. Jessica Penne has been around the block a time or two, facing some great fighters. I'm going Jessica Penne by decision in this one. And that leads to a couple of welterweights, Dwight Grant versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Both guys have been struggling as of recent. Dwight Grant has dropped 3 of his last 4 bouts, with only 1 win since the beginning of 2020. Stoltzfus won his Contender Series bout, got a contract, looked good, and then since then has dropped his first 3 UFC bouts. Dwight Grant is definitely a better striker than grappler, but is comfortable enough on the ground, which is a good thing, as Stoltzfus will more than likely attempt to get this fight on the ground and use his jiu-jitsu. Stoltzfus has struggled to get guys on the ground, though. He has great jiu-jitsu, but he struggles to get guys to the ground and be able to use that jiu-jitsu. I think that's going to work against him. I'm going Dwight Grant by second round TKO. That leads to a big fight in the light heavyweight division. Dustin Jacoby versus Dae-Un Jung, 2 guys that have been on an absolute tear since joining the UFC. Neither of them have lost, with Jung winning 4 of 5 with 1 draw, and Jacoby winning 5 of 6 with 1 draw as well. Both fighters are fairly well-rounded. I would say Jacoby is definitely the better striker, where Jung is definitely the better wrestler. This fight is insanely tough to call, just with both guys being on the roll that they have been. But I like the wrestling aspect of Dae-Un Jung. I like the fact that he can get this fight to the ground. So I'm going Dae-Un Jung by decision. That leads to Bill Algeo versus Herbert Burns. Very interesting fight. Both of these guys had their original opponent pull out of this fight card, and then they're in the same weight class, so they're like, why not fight each other? And it worked out perfectly for both of these guys to stay on this card, to get a fight in. Both guys are good grapplers, and I could see this being a fight with a lot of scrambles, a lot of times where both guys are trying to get the dominant position. Burns has not fought in almost 2 years, though. I do worry about ring rust becoming a factor in this matchup. So I'm going to go with Bill Algeo by decision, just because he's been the more active fighter as of recent. Now, for honestly the fight, I might be more excited about this fight than any other fight on this card. Ricky Simon versus Jack Shore. I'm insanely surprised that this fight is not on the main card. They could have easily put this fight on the main card. Ricky Simon, who actually trains not too far from where I live, he's only a few hours out, taking on the undefeated European Jack Shore. Another matchup of 2 terrific grapplers. Both fighters are great wrestlers. I would say Shore does have a bit better of a submission game, Simon being the more pressure and ground and pound type of fighter. Another matchup where I could see guys trying to go back and forth, trying to get the more dominant position. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at Jack Shore. I mean, he is a serious contender or future contender, I should say, in this bantamweight division. I have him keeping his undefeated record and improving to 17-0 by decision. Next up, we have Punahele Soriano versus Dalcha Lungiambala. Bula. All right, there we go. Lungiambula. Two middleweights trying to get back on the winning side of things, as both have dropped 2 straight fights. Soriano has had a fairly tough road since joining the UFC, though, with wins over Jamie Pickett in the Dana White Contender Series and a win over Dusko Todorovic, and losses versus Nick Maximov and Brendan Allen. Soriano is definitely a better striker with a decent ground game. Dalcha is a much better wrestler, but does not have an amazing stand-up game. Soriano struggles a lot against the takedown, though, so I think that will be the big difference in this fight. I'm going Dalcha by decision. And that leads us to the main card, Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate. 2 highly experienced fighters that have been around the block a time or two, facing some of the greatest women fighters that we have ever seen in the UFC. We're talking Ronda Rousey. We're talking Holly Holm. We're talking Valentina Shevchenko. We're talking Amanda Nunes. These ladies have faced the best of the best. This is actually a rescheduled fight that was supposed to happen at UFC 276 a couple weeks ago, but Lauren Murphy did have to drop out last minute. I don't really need to go over these ladies' resumes. We know what these 2 ladies mean, but I'm going Miesha Tate in this fight. I think she's kind of got a second wind in her career. She's trying to bounce back after kind of dropping off in the bantamweight division, moving down to the featherweight division. I think she's going to get the win in this fight. I'm saying she finishes by 3rd round submission, getting a big win in her flyweight debut. That leads to a very exciting featherweight matchup. Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. 2 guys that are fairly experienced in the UFC. Shane Burgos was able to snap a 2-fight skid in his last matchup against Billy Quarantillo, where Jourdain was able to rattle off 2 straight wins earlier this year. With his most recent one being against Lando Venata this year. Burgos has definitely faced tougher competition since joining the UFC, though. He has faced the likes of Edson Barboza, Josh Emmett, Cub Swanson, and Calvin Kattar. Both guys are primarily strikers, so I do see this fight staying on the feet for a majority of this fight. But I honestly really have high hopes for Charles Jourdain, and I think he gets the biggest win of his career versus a ranked opponent with a first round, I'm going early, first round KO victory. Then next up, we have a big matchup between a couple of ranked flyweights, between Matt Schnell and Sumu Darje. Matt Schnell, the higher ranked fighter, but is going in the wrong direction. He has dropped 3 of his last 4. Granted, those 3 losses are against the likes of Brandon Royval, Alexander Pantoja, highly ranked guys in the flyweight division, facing the rising star, really, in Sumu Darji. He has come in, won his first 3 fights, or winning his last 3 fights. I believe he did lose his UFC debut, but since then has been on a roll. 2 contrasting styles in this one. Schnell is definitely more of the grappler, looking to get this fight to the ground. Sumu Darje is an absolute fantastic striker, and will definitely try to keep this fight standing, which he does fairly well, too. He has almost a 80% takedown defense percentage, so that will definitely work in his favor. I look at Sumu Darji to keep this fight standing. I look at him to do so successfully and get the second round TKO victory. That leads to Li Jingliang versus Muslim Salikov. An awesome fight in the welterweight division. Muslim, the insanely fun striker, unbelievably fun striker. has been doing absolutely fantastic since losing his UFC debut by rattling off 5 straight wins following that loss. Jing Liang, who is also a great striker, is looking to get back on the winning side of things. He's lost 2 of his last 3. Granted, that is to Neil Magny, the always durable Neil Magny, and Khamzat Chimaev, one of the biggest rising stars in the UFC. This is going to be an absolute war between these two, but I am siding with the unranked fighter, Salikov, by 3rd round KO. I have him completely knocking out Jing Liang, but I could see it going the other way too. That leads to our co-main event, a big matchup in the strawweight division. Michelle Waterson takes on Amanda Lemos. Highly experienced Michelle Waterson taking on Amanda Lemos, trying to get the loss off her record, or redeem her loss on that record in her last fight versus Jessica Andrade. As I said, Michelle Waterson she's the far more experienced fighter in this matchup. She has faced the best of the best this division has ever had to offer. She's faced Marina Rodriguez. She's faced Carla Esparza, the current champ. She's faced Joanna, the former champ. She's faced Rose, the former champ. So she definitely has the experience advantage to go along with the fantastic grappling that she possesses. Amanda Lemos was on a tear through this division, though, before facing Jessica Andrade earlier this year, rattling off 5 straight wins, and at the time it got her into the top 10. Since that, she's only dropped 1. She's only at 11. Amanda Lemos is the much better striker, so I expect her to try and keep this fight on the feet, which she does great. She 88% takedown defense, so I can definitely see her doing that, opening up the striking department for her, and I have her winning this fight. I'm going Amanda Lemos by decision, bouncing back from her Jessica Andrade loss, and that leads to our main event of the evening. Couple of top 3 ranked featherweights, Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. Both of these guys have faced the best of the best that this division has ever seen. Ortega only has 2 losses in his career. That's to the 2 greatest featherweights of all time, Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. Those are his only 2 losses in his career. So he obviously has some big wins. He's beat the likes of Korean Zombie, Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson, Clay Guida. But Yair Rodriguez's resume is not too far off from Brian Ortega's. He had his 2 UFC losses are to Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway. But he has wins over Jeremy Stevens, Korean Zombie, and arguably the greatest lightweight of all time, BJ Penn, the legend himself. Ortega comes in as the much better grappler, but he has improved his striking a lot over the past couple years. Yair is more of the striker in this matchup. He has some highlight reel knockouts, including his against the Korean Zombie, where he got the last second of the 5th round, just threw his elbow up there, got the knockout victory. I think this fight is going to be awesome to watch. I think it's going to be very close, but I think Yair has a little bit more to fight for in this fight. I think if he beats Brian Ortega, he puts himself in competition with Josh Emmett for that next title shot against Alexander Volkanovski. Brian Ortega, that's not the same story. He's had 2 chances at the title. He's lost them both. So I don't know how close he is to another title shot, if that even comes anytime soon. So I'm going with Yair to win this fight. I don't think either guy gets the finish, though. I'm going Yair Rodriguez by decision. That is all I have for you this week. Next week is going to be a very fun show. As I said, I'll be reacting to this fight night card, Ortega versus Rodriguez. And that leads into UFC London the second time this year. If it's anywhere near as good as the last UFC London, we will be in for a great treat, headlined by heavyweights Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades. Huge fight in the heavyweight division. So look forward to seeing you all next week for Monday Night Fight Talk. Until then, you can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Send in any sort of questions that you would like to be asked, whether it be a short one that I can answer right there or a longer one that I can put on the show. Either way, send in those questions. I would love to interact with the fans a little bit more. But until then, thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and I will see you guys same time, same place next week, Monday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you all for listening.